Chapter 1. I should have run when the bells started tolling. They sounded wrong, too slow, too heavy, echoing through Silverbane Keep like the heartbeat of something dying. The air smelled of lavender and smoke, sweet at first, then bitter as it clung to my throat. But today was my mating ceremony, so I ignored the chill crawling down my spine. My maid's hands trembled as she wove silver ribbons into my hair, and I couldn't tell if it was excitement or fear. Perhaps both. The mirror showed a stranger, skin too pale, lips too still, eyes too blue. My mother's eyes. She would have said I looked like a ghost, pretending to be a bride.
Your mother would be proud,
My father said from the doorway. His voice always carried command, even when it was soft. I turned to find him standing there, tall and iron-willed, his silver wolf crest pinned at his collar. The years of war had carved lines into his face, but his eyes still held warmth, the kind that could make me feel small and safe at once.
She always said you'd marry beneath the blood moon.
He continued as he stepped closer.
Never thought it'd be a Rainman boy, though, but the moon goddess loves her ironies.
He smiled as he fastened the family pendant around my neck. The chain was cool against my skin, the moonstone catching the morning light. I pressed my fingers to it, trying to steady my heart. She used to tell me peace can come from embracing the unknown, I whispered. Father sighed.
And I want to believe she was right. After all this...
He gestured toward the open window, toward the courtyard where banners of silver and black fluttered side by side.
This is what she dreamed of.
Peace, union, the end of a century of blood between our packs, the Silverbane pack and the Nightfell pack. Callias Rainman and I had known each other long before this alliance was written in ink, before we became pawns, before the councils and their promises. He was the Alpha's son, the boy who used to sneak me wild berries and whisper of stars and freedom, the boy who swore that one day the fighting would end and our packs would live as one. Now he was Alpha, and for the sake of both our people, I needed to believe he still meant it. Even now, as I thought of his gray eyes and the way he smiled, soft, sunlight through fog, something warm unfurled in my chest. I wanted to believe that boy still existed, that this marriage was more than politics and power, that love, fragile as glass, could survive the weight of two broken legacies. The maid finished with my hair and slipped away. My father offered his arm.
Are you ready, my dear?
I forced a smile and lied. I've been ready all my life. We walked through the corridors together. My gown whispered across the stone, the scent of lilies and rain thick in the air. From the windows I saw them, the Nightfell banners arriving, black silk and silver crescents glinting in the light, their warriors standing in perfect lines. Something inside me went still. The air felt colder, sharper, like the moment before a storm breaks. But I said nothing, because today was supposed to end the war. Because today I was meant to become Luna. Because I loved him. The chapel was alive with gold light and whispers. Every corner of Silverbane Keep had been dressed for peace. Banners hung like vows, silver lilies twined around the altar, and candles burned low enough to weep wax down the stone. The air shimmered with the scent of wine and incense. As my father and I entered, the sound of conversation faltered. I could feel the weight of every gaze, nobles, elders, soldiers, all watching, all expecting. The daughter of Silverbane, walking to her future. To him. Callias stood at the end of the aisle, framed by the blood moon's pale glow through the chapel glass. He looked older than I remembered, though it had only been a year since we'd last met. Broader in the shoulders, harder in the jaw. His dark hair was neatly tied back, a silver clasp glinting against it. For a breath, I saw the boy I once knew, the one who used to laugh too loudly, who taught me how to track wolves in the mist, who whispered my name like it was a secret worth keeping. But then he lifted his gaze to mine. The world seemed to narrow to that moment, to those eyes. Gray as stormlight, just as I remembered, but now rimmed in faint red. A thin, unnatural ring, like fire smoldering behind frost. My steps faltered. He smiled, the same soft, careful smile. Yet it didn't reach those eyes. The priest's voice droned somewhere in the distance, reciting oaths and blessings to the goddess of unity. My father's hand rested gently over mine, grounding me as we reached the altar. Callias extended his own, steady, composed, the hand of an alpha, and when his skin brushed mine, the world felt colder.
Briar,
He said softly, so only I could hear.
you look radiant.
The words should have comforted me. They didn't. His voice had changed too. Lower, sharper at the edges. I forced a smile, because that's what I was supposed to do, because the eyes of both packs were on us, waiting to see if peace would take its first breath. The priest raised the ceremonial blade, the symbol of union. 2 drops of blood, 1 Silverbane, 1 Nightfell, bound under the moon. It was ancient, sacred, the moment that would seal our packs together forever.
Join hands.
He commanded. Callias took mine again. His palm was warm, too warm, as if fevered. When the blade touched our joined hands, the sting of the cut was sharp and clean. Our blood mingled on the silver surface, hissing faintly as it met the air. A murmur rippled through the crowd. For the briefest second, I thought I saw the red in his eyes brighten. A flicker, gone before I could be sure. Callias turned his head slightly, whispering so quietly I almost missed it.
Peace requires sacrifice.
The words brushed my ear like a prayer, soft, reverent, almost gentle. But something in the way he said them made my heart falter. Then he let go of my hand. At first, I thought it was part of the ritual. The priest began to speak again, voice quivering, but Callias didn't look at him. He looked past me, over my shoulder, and gave a small, precise nod. The sound came next. A crack, sharp and close, followed by a cry that died too quickly. The scent of blood hit the air before the scream did. Then chaos erupted. Nightfell soldiers moved like shadows breaking formation. Steel flashed under candlelight. One of the Silverbane guards fell where he stood, throat open and eyes wide in disbelief. Another reached for his blade. Too late. I froze. The world tilted.
Callias!
My father roared, shoving me behind him as the first blade met the marble floor.
What is this?
Callias didn't answer. His expression was calm, eerily so, as if this had been inevitable all along. The red around his irises burned brighter, the color bleeding outward like fire spreading through ice. My father lunged, but 3 Nightfell warriors were faster. They swarmed him, their movements practiced, efficient, not confusion, not panic, command. I heard my father's growl, raw, animal, then the sound of steel tearing through flesh. He wasn't dead yet, but he would be soon. Father! Someone seized my arm. I stumbled back, nearly slipping on the blood already streaking the floor. The lilies around the altar had fallen, crushed beneath boots. The priest tried to run, only to be struck down before the chapel doors. And Callias? Callias stood in the center of it all, his ceremonial blade slick and glinting crimson. I turned to him, my voice breaking. What did you do? Why? What is this? He looked at me and smiled. Not the soft, shy curve I remembered, but something colder, something final.
Oh, Briar,
He said, almost laughing.
still asking why even now.
Callias, I gasped, stepping back. You said this would end the war.
I said what you needed to hear.
His tone cut through my words like steel through silk.
Did you really think I wanted peace? That I wanted my father's enemies in my home? In my bloodline?
My throat closed. You lied. He chuckled, low and cruel.
You wanted to believe the fairy tale. The boy who loved the Silverbane girl, the alpha who dreamed of peace.
He stepped closer, and the red around his eyes seemed to glow.
But that was my father's weakness. Mercy. Diplomacy. I swore I'd finish what he couldn't.
My breath hitched. You said you loved me.
And you believed me.
His smile deepened, almost pitying.
You were always so easy to love, Briar. That's what made it so simple.
Behind him, more screams filled the air, familiar voices, my people falling one by one. My father's roar echoed once, then silence. He was surely dead now. Callias turned his blade and looked at it, as if admiring the blood that ran along its edge. Even if you didn't love me, what about the peace you promised?
Peace?
He said, lifting his gaze back to mine.
This is peace. My kind of peace. When one side no longer exists to fight.
The world swayed. My knees nearly buckled, but I stood there, trembling, broken, staring at the man I had promised my life to, the man who had just destroyed it. Callias's expression hardened. Without a word, he lifted his hand and signaled to one of the guards.
Killer.
The soldier stepped forward, blade raised. I stared at Callias, the taste of blood sharp on my tongue. Fear burned in my chest, but anger burned hotter. Why don't you do it yourself? I hissed, like a real man. The guard hesitated mid-step. Callias's head tilted, a flicker of interest crossing his face, or maybe amusement. Slowly, he turned back toward me.
You want me to end you myself?
He said, voice low, dangerous. Then he gave a faint, humorless smile.
Then I'll do you this mercy.
He stepped closer. The chapel was silent except for the soft drip of blood against stone. His sword gleamed under the candlelight as he raised it, the edge catching the gold of the flames. For a moment, I couldn't move. His face was expressionless, all duty, no hesitation. Then the blade stopped. Halfway through the swing, his arm locked, his breath hitched, the muscles in his jaw flexed as though he were fighting something unseen inside himself. I watched, frozen, as the red and gray in his eyes warred against each other, one burning with bloodlust, the other clouded with restraint. He grit his teeth, trying to force the sword forward, but it wouldn't move. For a long, breathless moment, he just stared at me. Then he lowered the blade, his voice rough and strained.
I guess the moon wants you as my Luna.
The words dripped with contempt. He stepped closer until his breath brushed my cheek.
But you will still pay for your insolence.
The back of his weapon struck across my face, a flash of pain, a burst of white, and the world went silent. Darkness swallowed everything. Chapter 2. The first thing I felt was the cold. It seeped through the stone, through the torn fabric of my gown, through skin and bone until even my heartbeat felt frozen. My head throbbed with a dull, steady ache. The taste of iron still clung to my mouth. I opened my eyes to darkness. The air was damp and heavy, thick with the smell of rust, wet earth, and old blood. Chains clinked softly somewhere in the distance, slow, rhythmic, almost like breathing. A faint drip echoed from the ceiling, each drop hitting the floor with a sound too sharp in the silence. I tried to move, and pain lanced through my body. My wrists were bound, rough rope biting into torn skin. My veil was gone. My hair hung loose and tangled over my shoulders, the silver ribbons darkened with someone's blood. Maybe my own. For a long while I just sat there, staring into the dark. I leaned back against the wall, the stone biting through the thin fabric of my gown. The silence pressed in, heavier with every breath. I closed my eyes and tried to picture his face as it used to be, before everything shattered. The Callias I'd known was not a killer. or at least I'd thought he wasn't. I remembered him at 16, standing at the edge of the river that divided our territories. He'd smiled that soft, uncertain smile that used to make my chest ache. "One day," he'd said, "we'll cross this water without guards watching." Back then, I believed him. He used to bring me wild berries and tell stories of constellations. His hands were ink-stained from his father's maps, not blood. He spoke of peace like it was something sacred, something he could build if he just tried hard enough. And I loved him for it. I loved the way he laughed, unguarded and bright. The way he listened when I spoke of my people, my dreams, my fears. The way he promised that our father's hatred would die with their generation. But the man who stood in that chapel was not that boy. The man who stood before me had eyes that burned red around the edges, like something had hollowed him out and left a stranger in his place. His smile had been wrong, calculated, cruel. Even his voice had changed. The warmth was gone. Everything was gone. He'd killed my father. He'd slaughtered my pack. And he'd done it wearing the same expression he used to wear when he swore he loved me. How could someone change so completely? Was it power? Revenge? Or had the boy I loved always been a lie, hidden beneath the man he was becoming? I pressed my hands to my face, the rope digging into my skin. My breath came ragged, uneven. He'd looked right at me as my father fell. He'd seen it, the blood, the betrayal, and he hadn't even flinched. That image was carved into my mind now, the way his blade gleamed in the candlelight, the calm in his voice when he ordered my death. I wanted to hate him. I did hate him. But somewhere, buried deep under the rage and grief, there was still that haunting question. Why didn't he kill me? He could have. He should have. Instead, he stopped. Something made him stop. I hated that I cared enough to wonder. Maybe it was weakness. Maybe it was guilt. Or maybe, in some cruel twist of fate, he wanted me alive just to see how much pain I could survive. My hands clenched around the rope until the fibers cut into my wrists. If that was his plan, he would find out just how strong the last of Silverbane truly was, because I wasn't done yet. The sound of boots echoed down the corridor before I saw him, heavy, measured, familiar. I looked up from where I sat in the corner of the cell, my back to the damp wall, every muscle in my body tightening. The torchlight from the hall stretched long shadows across the floor. And then he appeared. Callias Rainman, framed in flickering orange, dressed in black and silver, the same ceremonial blade now sheathed at his side. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that doorway. The man who had burned my world to ash stood there like it hadn't cost him anything. Something inside me snapped. Before I could think, I lunged. The chains yanked me back hard, the iron biting into my wrists, but I didn't care. My voice tore through the still air. "Why didn't you just kill me?" I screamed. He didn't flinch. His gaze swept over me, disheveled gown, bruised face, blood at my lip, and he said nothing. "Why?" I demanded again, my throat raw. "You slaughtered my father, my people. You destroyed everything. Why leave me alive, Callias?" He stepped closer, the shadows clinging to him like a second skin. His silence burned hotter than any answer. And then it hit me. The truth I'd been avoiding since the moment I woke. He'd killed my father and every leader of Silverbane for one reason: control. To take the pack. To make it his. And I had been the key. He'd pretended to love me, not out of affection, but strategy. Because he knew my father would never allow me to marry a man I didn't love. So he'd made sure I did. He'd made sure I believed every smile, every letter, every promise whispered under starlight. My stomach twisted. My hands shook. The man I loved had built my trust just to turn it into a weapon. Callias finally met my eyes. For the briefest moment, the red around his irises flickered, fading, almost disappearing, leaving only the gray I remembered. the boy who once held my hand beneath the birch trees. But it was gone in a blink. The red returned, bright and cruel, and a smile curved his lips, sharp as a blade.
Like I said,
He murmured, voice smooth, mocking.
the moon seems to want you as my Luna, despite my objections.
His tone dripped with disdain. When his gaze raked over me, it wasn't hunger or longing. It was disgust. My laugh came out hoarse. "You're not treating me like a Luna," I said, tugging at the chains, the metal rattling between us. He tilted his head slightly, eyes cold.
Yes, we'll fix that.
He took another step closer until the torchlight caught the edge of his jaw.
I had to keep you here, until I decide what to do with you.
His voice lowered, almost curious.
And it seems I cannot kill you. I've tried.
I froze, my heart stumbling in my chest. He watched me, savoring the confusion.
For some reason,
He continued.
something stops me. But you're still a Luna now, whether I like it or not. And I can't very well keep a Luna in a dungeon forever.
He leaned down, so close I could feel his breath against my cheek.
So, await further instructions.
Then his hand shot out, tangling roughly in my hair. Pain lanced through my scalp as he jerked my head back, forcing me to meet his eyes.
Do not defy me,
He hissed.
ever.
He released me so suddenly I stumbled forward, catching myself on shaking hands. My scalp burned where his fingers had been. He turned toward the door, voice flat again.
Clean her up,
He ordered to the guards waiting beyond the cell.
and find her suitable quarters. I don't want to see filth when I pass through my own halls.
The door slammed behind him, his footsteps fading down the corridor until there was only silence. I stayed there for a long moment, the taste of iron on my tongue, hatred building in my chest like a storm. He thought he owned me now. He thought I was broken. But he'd made one mistake. He'd left me alive. Chapter 3. The torches burned low when the door creaked open. 2 guards stepped inside, the metal of their armor scraping softly against the stone.
"Get up, Luna."
One of them said mockingly. Rough hands grabbed my arms before I could move. The ropes came loose only long enough for shackles to replace them. Cold iron clamped around my wrists, and I bit back a sound of pain. They dragged me through the corridor, the air thick with damp and silence. Every step echoed, each one pulling me farther from the life I'd known. The upper halls of Silverbane Keep, my home, looked different now. My mother's tapestries had been stripped from the walls, the family crest torn down. The silver wolf that once stood at the archway was gone, replaced by the black crescent of Nightfell. Every guard who passed me wore that insignia. Every servant kept their head down. The smell of smoke lingered in the air. Parts of the keep still smoldered from the fires of yesterday. Through a shattered window, I saw the courtyard, littered with what was left of my pack's banners, blood soaked into the dirt where my people had fallen. I swallowed hard, forcing my eyes forward. One of the guards, I recognized as Silverbane's, muttered something under his breath. "The traitor's daughter," and laughed. The other gripped my arm tighter, shoving me toward the grand stairwell. Traitor. The word burned through me. My father had died defending this land. So why did one of our own call him a traitor? He was anything but that. Gods, I missed him. I missed the way his laughter filled the halls, the sound of his boots when he came to check on me before dawn patrols. I missed his voice when he called me my heart. It didn't feel real that he was gone, that his warmth, his certainty, could simply stop existing in the same world I still occupied. He had always been my anchor, the one person who could quiet the noise of the world with a look. Without him, everything felt unsteady, hollow. But why call him a traitor? The question dug into me like a splinter I couldn't pull free. When we reached the top of the stairs, the air grew cleaner, colder. The corridors were bright with torchlight and silence, the kind that existed only when people were afraid to speak. They stopped at a door I didn't recognize. A room that had once belonged to one of the council members, maybe, now empty, reclaimed. One guard unlocked the door and shoved me inside. The room was bare, a bed, a basin of water, and a single narrow window barred with iron. The scent of new wood and blood still lingered. It was better than the dungeon, but not by much. Before they could leave, I turned to them. Did he give any other orders? Neither answered. One of them smirked.
Only that you're not to die without his permission?
The door shut. The lock clicked. I stood there for a moment, staring at the walls that weren't mine, at the moonlight cutting through the bars like pale claws. This was what being Luna meant, a title without power, a crown made of chains. I sank onto the bed, my wrists aching from the weight of the shackles. The silence pressed in again, bringing memories I didn't want. Callias, smiling under the birch trees. Callias, laughing when I teased him about his solemn face. Callias, raising a sword against my father. I pressed my fists against my temples, trying to drown it out. He had fooled me so easily. All those years of letters and whispered promises, all that tenderness. He'd studied me as carefully as any strategist studies his enemy's map. He'd known my father would never force me to marry a man I didn't love, so he'd made sure I did. And the worst part? I had believed him with all I was. My jaw tightened. Never again, I whispered to the empty room. A door opened somewhere down the corridor, boots on stone, muffled voices. I straightened instinctively, but they passed, fading into silence again. I lay back on the bed, staring up at the cracked ceiling until my eyes burned. Sleep wouldn't come. Only the endless questions did. Why hadn't he killed me? What had stopped him? He claims it's the moon goddess that stopped him, but I didn't believe it for a second. It was something else, something that had to do with why his eyes turned from gray to red. I didn't know what it was, but I would find out. The next morning, the sound of the door unlocking jolted me awake. I sat up quickly, the movement pulling against the shackles. A maid stepped inside, followed by several others carrying basins, folded linens, and a rack of gowns. She was tall and fair, her dark hair tied neatly at the nape of her neck. Her expression was calm, but distant, practiced.
I'm Gisela,
She said, dipping her head slightly.
the Alpha has ordered that you be trained.
I blinked at her, disoriented. Trained?
Yes, on the ways of the Nightfell Pack, before you are to be presented to the Council.
She replied, polite but empty. Her words lingered in the air like a blade laid quietly on a table. I studied the women behind her, 5 of them, silent and efficient, already setting out towels and brushes. None of them wore Silverbane colors. Their accents were foreign to me, their movements cautious but loyal in that quiet, fearful way that only Nightfell servants seemed to master. No familiar faces, no one I could trust. So much for getting information. They went about their work quickly, the sound of water sloshing into the basin filling the silence. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching, trying to decide if I hated their obedience or envied it. Gisela turned toward me, hands folded neatly before her.
We will begin immediately,
She said. I said nothing. She motioned to one of the other maids, who began to untangle my hair, carefully working out the knots left from the dungeon. The brush dragged through, tugging at my scalp until my eyes watered. Over the next few days, the routine became mechanical. Bath, dress, sit, repeat. They scrubbed away the dirt, combed through my hair, fitted me into Nightfell silks that smelled of foreign spices and strange perfumes. They corrected the way I walked, the way I held my head, the way I looked at people, or didn't. Each morning, at training time, Gisela and 2 other maids, Myra and Sarah, would come to my room. 6 guards would be waiting to escort us. They transported me to a different hall, a huge practice room where other maids waited in neat rows. There I was drilled on etiquette, dressing, and everything needed to look and act like a Luna. None of the servants would speak to me. They all cowered in fear except for Gisela, who was not comforting or kind, but simply stoic and professional. Callias must have threatened them and instructed them not to speak. Judging by how none of them were Silverbane, he was clearly trying to alienate me, to cut me off from my people and surround me with strangers who would not risk a whisper. After my lessons each day, I was escorted by several guards back to my rooms. I watched the routine of the guards until their steps became a map in my head. I knew when there was a shift change. They weren't allowed to let me out. There was not much I could do. My front door was heavily guarded, a wall of armored bodies. So I listened, eagerly. I wasn't allowed anywhere besides the practice hall or wherever Gisela instructed, per Callias's orders. Still, I coaxed Gisela to allow me to go to the library, couched in humble requests. A Luna must know courtly conduct, I told her. I need books on etiquette. All the books I'd grown up reading were gone or rewritten. Many of the old volumes had been replaced with Nightfell editions stamped with their seal. But when Gisela wasn't looking, I slipped history folios and old chronicles into my hands. The fragments that remained. Treaties, maps, ledgers, names, and scraps of letters. I tucked them beneath etiquette manuals and carried what I could back to my room. Once, I thought Sarah, the maid that usually accompanied Gisela and Myra in the mornings, saw me. She watched me slide a history book beneath a silk binding, her face unreadable. But she said nothing. Whether it was fear, pity, or something else, she kept her silence. It didn't matter. I had no way out yet, only corridors watched by blades and a title forced upon me. But knowledge is a different kind of chain breaker. I would learn their customs, memorize the names of the men who'd killed my people, and map their routines. I would hide their secrets behind the polite smile Gisela insisted I wear. And when the time came, I would use what I'd learned. I would unravel him from within. I would destroy their alpha from the inside. Chapter 4. The next morning, I woke to a loud bang that rattled my chamber doors. My heart leapt into my throat. I sat upright, blinking in the dim light, expecting Gisela, Myra, and Sarah to enter for the usual routine, but only Sarah stepped inside, flanked by 3 guards. She didn't curtsy or greet me. Her face was pale, her eyes wide but resolute.
"There,"
she said, pointing directly at me.
"I saw her with the books. She's not allowed to have them."
The words hit harder than the sound of the door slamming shut behind them. Sarah took a step forward, voice gaining strength as if reciting something she'd practiced.
"She's been taking them for days. History, ledgers, everything about our pack. Look how many she's hidden."
One of the guards crossed the room and yanked open the small chest beside my chair. Books spilled out, the ones I hadn't managed to hide after reading last night. Pages fluttered open, their Nightfell crests glaring like accusations.
"I didn't say anything at first because I wasn't sure,"
Sarah went on, her voice trembling slightly, though not with fear.
"But yesterday, I caught her red-handed."
Briar said nothing. The words froze in my throat, my body refusing to move. I could only stare at her, at the girl who had smiled politely through lessons, who had watched in silence as I read. I'd thought she pitied me. The guards turned on her, suspicious. One of them asked sharply,
"And why wait until now to report this?"
Sarah swallowed hard.
"Because I wasn't certain before. I wanted proof."
The lead guard's gaze flicked to the books scattered across the floor, then to me. His expression hardened.
"You have it now."
2 of them stepped closer, hands gripping their weapons, while Sarah kept her eyes fixed on the ground. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. The betrayal sat heavy in my chest, sharp, suffocating. Not one word left my mouth as the guards closed in. The guards took every scrap I'd hidden, ledgers, treaties, the brittle pages I'd risked for a single truth. They left without a word, boots clanking away down the corridor, and I sat there with my palms empty and my chest hollow, already certain Callias would be told, and that whatever punishment he fancied would follow. When the footsteps faded, Sarah did not leave with them. She stayed, hands folded at her waist, face schooled back into that impassive mask she'd worn during lessons. For a long moment, she simply watched the dust settle on the floor where the books had been. Then, when the door had clicked shut and the world felt unbearably quiet, she shifted and leaned closer, her voice dropping so low I had to strain to hear.
I did this for your sake, she said. Meet me in the underground hall after the shift change tonight. I'll explain everything.
I could only stare at her, too stunned to speak. For my sake? After betraying me in front of the guards? None of it made sense. Why would she expose me only to ask me to meet her later? Why not tell me when we were alone before? How could she even know about an underground hall? And why would she risk speaking of it here, with guards right outside the door? She had to know I couldn't leave this room. So what did she expect me to do? Before I could find words, she looked at the puzzled look on my face and sighed quietly, crouched down and began tapping the floor. 8 measured knocks. On the 8th tap, I heard a faint click. A seam split open between the tiles beside my bed, and a small square of the floor shifted upward, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. My heart pounded. I looked at Sarah, completely in shock. The silence between us was thick with questions. How long had this been here? Who else knew? Had she built this? She avoided my stare, pressing one hand to the edge of the loose tile. With a quiet, practiced motion, she slid it back into place, and then dragged the rug slightly over it, smoothing the folds until the seam disappeared completely. It was as if the floor had never moved. She turned toward the door, her expression unreadable.
Tonight,
she whispered again.
Don't be late.
Then she was gone. The room fell silent once more. My thoughts raced faster than my heartbeat. How could I trust her? Why help me now? Was this another trap Callias had arranged? A test to see if I'd try to escape? Or was Sarah working for someone else entirely? I stared at the place where the floor had opened, half expecting it to shift again. It didn't. The room was still, but everything inside me wasn't. For the rest of the day, I could barely breathe for the anticipation. Every minute dragged like an hour. My thoughts never left that hidden staircase beneath the tiles. During my lessons, Gisela was nowhere to be found. Only Sarah and Myra came. I tried to catch Sarah's eye more than once, silently begging for some kind of sign or explanation. But she wouldn't look at me, not even once. Her face stayed perfectly blank, her movements measured and professional, as if nothing had happened that morning. So many questions burned in my mind. Where was Gisela? Was she gone by Callias's orders? Did Sarah have something to do with it? Was Myra part of whatever secret Sarah was keeping? Or was she as much in the dark as I was? I couldn't ask. The walls had ears here, and every servant seemed to fear the very act of whispering. At one point, when Gisela's absence became too obvious, I tried asking one of the maids where she was. The girl's eyes widened, and she immediately looked away, mumbling something about orders from above, before retreating like a frightened child. So I said nothing else. The rest of the day blurred past me. The lessons felt longer than ever. The old man teaching Nightfell customs speaking in a droning voice I could barely follow. Something about proper greetings, about lineage and submission before elders. I tried to nod when he looked my way, but my mind was far from the words leaving his mouth. All I could think about was Sarah's voice, soft and urgent. Meet me in the underground hall after the shift change. When the lessons finally ended, I was escorted back to my chambers. The halls were dim by then, the torches burning lower, the air colder. I still hadn't seen Callias since that day in the dungeon. Part of me was relieved. Another part wondered when he would call for me, when he'd finally decide what punishment fit my defiance. Back in my room, I sat by the narrow window and watched the sky fade to deep violet. My stomach twisted tighter with every passing minute. I listened to the faint shuffle of boots outside my door, memorizing the rhythm. Then, finally, I heard it. The sharp clatter of armor, the low exchange of voices, the shift change. My heart leapt into my throat. I waited just long enough for the sound of their steps to fade down the corridor, then pushed back the covers and hurriedly climbed out of bed. The chamber was silent, except for my breathing. It was time. Chapter 5. I grabbed a dark cloth and wrapped it around my hair and lower face. My fingers trembled, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Freedom, even a sliver of it, tasted electric. I crouched beside the bed and brushed my fingertips over the tiles. 8 precise taps, just as Sarah had done. A faint click answered. The stone shifted, and the tiles slid open to reveal the narrow staircase descending into darkness. I drew in a breath, then climbed down quickly, pulling the hatch closed above me. Sarah was waiting at the bottom. A thin veil covered her hair, though I could still see her face. She held a second veil in her hand, clearly meant for me, but when she saw what I had improvised, she nodded in approval. I opened my mouth to demand answers, but she lifted a finger to her lips. Not yet. We moved in silence. The tunnel was damp and narrow, lit only by dim sconces wedged into the earth. Our footsteps echoed like whispers of ghosts. We walked for what felt like forever, then took 2 sharp left turns. Without warning, Sarah grabbed my wrist and pulled me down. We dropped into a lower passage, a hidden shaft barely wide enough for both of us. Dirt scraped my palms, my knees ached, and the fall stole my breath, but I didn't make a sound. We landed in a darker tunnel. Sarah didn't hesitate. She led me onward until we reached a small wooden door, nearly invisible against the stone wall. She knocked, 8 times, that same steady rhythm. The door opened. A face appeared. One I recognized, though I couldn't place immediately through the dim. But when the room beyond lit up, my breath caught. There were people. Dozens of them. 30, maybe more. And every face was familiar. My old nursemaid, silver hair piled in her usual bun, tears already in her eyes. The pack healer who used to treat scraped knees and bruised shins. 2 former guards I'd known since childhood. Maids who had braided my hair on the morning of my wedding, before it all fell apart. All Silverbane, all alive, all here. For a moment I couldn't move. The relief hit so hard it hurt. They bowed as one, as though I were still their Alpha's daughter, their Luna. I choked on a breath and moved forward, embracing my nursemaid first, then the healer, then the maids who had once fussed over ribbons and flowers in my hair. They held me tightly, trembling, reverent, desperate. I had thought I had no one left. But my people were still here, hidden beneath the very halls where Callias and his wolves ruled upstairs. Finally, I turned to Sarah. She stood apart from them, not bowing, not crying, just watching me with steady eyes. She wasn't Silverbane. That much was certain now. She waited until the embraces ended, until the room quieted, then met my gaze.
I know you have questions,
she said. I did. 1,000 of them, burning like wildfire under my ribs. Why was Sarah helping me? Why betray me in front of the guards only to lead me here? How long had she known about this place? About them? Was this rebellion her doing or someone else's? And these people? My people? How long had they been hiding down here? Were they living beneath the keep this whole time while I rotted in that room above? How many had escaped the massacre? How many hadn't? Did they see what happened that day? Did they see my father fall? The thought twisted something sharp in my chest. And Sarah, how did she know them? She wasn't Silverbane. I was sure of it now. So who was she working for? Had she been one of Callias's spies, Or was she betraying him too? If she was telling the truth, what did she mean by for my sake? Why would anyone from Nightfell risk helping me? And how had she opened that passage, one that even I, the Alpha's daughter, had never known existed? Then there were darker questions, the ones I didn't want to ask but couldn't stop from forming. Had Callias known they were here all along? Was this another test? Another cruel game to see if I'd crawl through his traps? Was he watching right now, waiting for me to slip? I glanced around the room again, at the familiar faces, the dim torches, the faint smell of soil and sweat. No one looked like a soldier. No one looked like a liar. Just people, tired, hungry, broken, clinging to hope in the dark. Still, after everything, I didn't know who I could trust anymore. My voice felt small when I finally spoke. I don't even know where to start. Sarah's eyes softened just slightly, as though she understood the weight of everything pressing against me.
Then start anywhere,
She said quietly.
we have time.
But did we? If the guards noticed I was gone, if Callias woke before dawn and found my room empty, my throat tightened. Just tell me what's going on, I whispered. How you found this place, how you knew where to find me, and why. My voice broke. Why risk all this for me? Sarah nodded slowly, the veil casting faint shadows across her face.
I'll tell you,
She said.
but first, you need to understand who I am and who I'm not.
Sarah looked at me for a long moment, as if measuring whether I was ready to hear what she was about to say. Then, finally, she spoke.
I am Callias's friend, and once, his trusted confidant.
Her voice was steady, but there was something hollow beneath it.
Callias had always loved you, Briar. He wanted peace between Silverbane and Nightfell. He talked about unity, about ending generations of blood. He was different then, gentle, thoughtful, kind. But all of a sudden, something changed. He began talking about how he wanted to destroy the Silverbane pack.
I felt the words like a blade sliding between my ribs. Sarah continued, her eyes distant as if she were reliving it.
He started sounding like his uncle. The man hated your pack, hated your father especially, so I thought maybe his uncle had something on him, or had poisoned his mind somehow. I began to investigate.
Her hand tightened around the edge of the table beside her.
But that's when I found something strange. His uncle had stopped showing up to council meetings. No one had seen him for weeks. When I asked Callias about it, he said his uncle was away, out in foreign lands, exploring. And I believed him.
Sarah's voice cracked on the next words.
But when he ordered the Silverbane attack, I tried to stop him. I begged him not to do it. I even risked sending a message to your father to warn him.
Her gaze fell to the ground.
He found out. He had the guards beat me until I could barely stand. He left me in the dungeon for days. I thought I would die there. Then one day, he came back. He said if I ever wanted my position back, I'd have to earn it, by spying on you.
She met my eyes again.
I pretended to agree.
I stared at her, stunned. The room felt too small to contain all the questions clawing at me. How do I know you aren't deceiving me right now? I asked quietly. Sarah's expression changed. Pain flickered through it like light through cracks in stone.
Because during the massacre,
She said softly.
he killed the love of my life. Maiden, your father's captain.
The words struck me like thunder.
He and I were in a forbidden relationship.
She went on, voice trembling slightly.
We used these very tunnels to meet in secret. That's how I know every inch of them. When Callias's men came for the Silverbane leaders, Maiden tried to protect your father. Callias cut him down himself.
My breath caught. I knew Maiden. He had been kind and honest. He had taught me how to hold a blade steady, how to read the signs of an ambush. I could still hear his laugh in the training yards. I swallowed hard. So how did you meet all of them? I gestured to the survivors gathered in the room. Sarah glanced at them briefly, then back to me.
After the massacre, she said, I learned Callias didn't just kill your father. He killed every Silverbane leader who refused to kneel. And the way he did it, the precision, the choice of who to eliminate, it was exactly how his uncle used to talk about handling enemies.
She shook her head slowly.
But something didn't make sense. Callias was never cruel, not like that. So I went through every order, every scroll of record I could find. There was nothing about his uncle leaving Nightfell. No official departure. Nothing.
Her tone darkened.
Then, to cover what he'd done, Callias told the people of Nightfell, and every Silverbane who hadn't been in the palace that day, that your father betrayed the alliance. He said your father murdered his uncle during the wedding and broke the treaty. He made himself look like the victim, the Alpha forced to strike down a traitor to preserve peace.
She let out a bitter laugh.
And they believed him. Most of them still do.
My stomach twisted. So that was why they called him a traitor. Sarah's voice lowered to a whisper.
But I knew better. I searched for any record of the uncle's death, any order sending him to foreign lands, and there was nothing. Until one of the maids I still trusted told me she'd seen something strange, a locked chamber beneath the east wing. Inside, she said, there was a man who looked just like Callias's uncle, only wrong, still, breathing, but not alive.
The room seemed to grow colder.
I went to see for myself,
she said, her voice barely above a breath.
And she was right. He's there, Briar, trapped. It's like he's not dead or alive, just existing.
She paused, then glanced around at the people surrounding us. The Silverbane survivors.
After that, I knew something was deeply wrong. I started looking for others who'd escaped the slaughter, anyone still loyal to your father. Some were hiding in nearby villages, others in servant quarters, pretending to be Nightfell born. I brought them here through the same tunnels Maiden once showed me.
Her eyes flicked to the older healer standing by the far wall.
We built this place together. Every night, one more found their way down here. Word spread quietly that the Alpha's daughter might still be alive. They've been waiting for you.
The healer bowed her head, tears glinting in her eyes. Sarah stepped closer, her tone soft but firm.
You're their hope, Briar. You're what's left of Silverbane.
For a long moment, I just stood there, surrounded by the faces of people I thought I'd lost forever. The air was thick with silence, the kind that carries both grief and hope. They were watching me, waiting. Some had tears in their eyes. Others held their heads low, the weight of loss etched deep into their faces. A few clutched each other's hands, afraid to believe that I was really here, that this wasn't another dream or trick. I cleared my throat, though my voice still shook. I thought I was alone, I said quietly. I thought all of you were gone. The old healer, the one who'd tended my scrapes when I was a child, stepped forward.
We never stopped fighting for you, my lady,
she said, bowing her head.
We've been waiting, hoping you'd come back.
Her words hit me harder than I expected. I looked around at them, the guards, the servants, the families hiding in the shadows, the people who had followed my father's banner of silver and moonlight, the people Callias had tried to erase. I don't know what's become of the world above, I said, but I do know this. My father wasn't a traitor, and we're going to prove it. A low murmur spread through the crowd, not disbelief, but something else, a flicker of courage. Sarah stepped forward beside me.
And how do you intend to do that?
I turned to her. You said Callias told everyone my father betrayed both pacts, that he murdered his uncle and broke the treaty. Sarah nodded grimly. Then we'll prove him a liar, I said. If his uncle is still alive, then everything Callias built his reign on, every accusation, every false word, will fall apart. The old healer frowned.
You mean to show the uncle to the council?
Exactly. I straightened my shoulders, finding my voice again. If we can prove Callias's uncle still lives, then the truth will spread. The council will have no choice but to question him. And once they do, we'll show the world who the real traitor is. Sarah's brow furrowed.
You're talking about sneaking into the East Wing. That's suicide, Briar. It's heavily guarded. Callias keeps that side of the keep locked down at all hours.
One of the younger guards, a Silverbane soldier barely older than me, spoke from the corner.
My lady, if you plan to go into the East Wing, you won't go alone. Some of us still know the old tunnels that lead beneath the council chambers.
Sarah hesitated, studying me as if searching for weakness.
You understand what happens if he catches you, don't you?
I do, I said. My voice didn't waver. But if he could look me in the eyes while murdering my father, I can look him in the eyes when I bring his lies to light. A faint smile touched Sarah's lips, proud but sad.
You sound just like your father.
The room fell quiet again, but it was a different kind of silence this time, steadier, resolved. For the first time since that day, the fear in their faces shifted into something stronger. Hope. I turned back toward them, my hands curling into fists. We'll meet here every night to plan, I said. Sarah nodded slowly.
Then it settled.
As I looked around the chamber, at the faces of my people, at the torches burning low, at the tunnel that had brought me here, one thought burned brighter than the rest. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was war, the quiet kind that begins in the dark. And for the first time since that cursed wedding day, I didn't just feel broken. I felt purpose. Chapter 6. Sarah insisted on escorting me back to my chambers. The others stayed behind, their whispers fading into the tunnels as we walked. The path was colder now, the torches flickering low, shadows stretching long against the stone. I wanted to speak, to ask her more about the plan, about what would happen if we were caught. But every time I opened my mouth, she shook her head slightly and pressed a finger to her lips. Not here. We moved in silence. The only sounds were the faint echo of our footsteps and the distant drip of water somewhere deeper in the dark. When we reached the stairway that led back to my room, Sarah motioned for me to climb first. I pushed the panel open and stepped out into the familiar quiet of my chamber. The air smelled faintly of lavender again, though now it only reminded me of smoke. She followed me through and closed the hatch, smoothing the rug over it until it looked untouched. I turned to her, lowering my voice. "Why can't we talk down there?" I asked. "It's safer than here, isn't it?" Sarah glanced toward the door before answering.
No, Briar. The tunnels aren't as private as you think.
I frowned. What do you mean? She stepped closer, her expression unreadable in the dim light.
The walls are thin. Too thin. When I first began using them, I could hear people talking in their chambers above. Whispered arguments, prayers, even footsteps.
She hesitated, voice dropping.
If we can hear them, then it means anyone walking the corridors could hear us too.
I felt a chill slide down my spine. You think someone's listening?
I think it's safer to assume someone always is.
Her eyes flicked toward the heavy door of my room, where the guards usually stood.
Keep your voice low from now on,
she murmured.
No matter who you're with, especially if you're alone.
I nodded slowly, the weight of her warning sinking in. Sarah moved toward the door, then paused with her hand on the latch.
We'll speak again soon,
she said softly.
When it's safe.
And before I could say another word, she slipped out into the corridor, leaving me alone with nothing but the flicker of candlelight and the faint hum of the keep beyond the walls. The door clicked softly behind Sarah, and the silence that followed was almost unbearable. I sank down onto the edge of my bed, the mattress dipping beneath me, my thoughts tumbling over one another like waves in a storm. Everything I'd heard that night replayed in fragments. Sarah's voice, steady and haunted. Maiden's name. The uncle's face, breathing but not alive. The look in Sarah's eyes when she said Callias used to love me. I pressed my palms to my temples and tried to breathe. Callias. His name felt foreign now. Once it had been a promise. Now it was poison. I thought of the boy who used to sneak me wild berries and talk about ending the bloodshed. The one who had looked at me like peace was possible, like the future could be ours. That boy was gone, replaced by something cold, calculated, and cruel. But what if Sarah was right? What if something made him that way? The image of his uncle lying somewhere beneath the keep clawed into my thoughts. Alive, but not alive. What could that even mean? Was Callias being controlled? Cursed? Number? I couldn't think like that. Because if I started to pity him, even for a moment, I might forget what he'd done. To my father. To our people. To me. I stared into the flickering light of the candle by my bedside, watching the flame bend and shudder. Sarah had said he told everyone my father was a traitor, that he'd killed his uncle and broken the treaty. The lie had spread far enough that even the guards whispered it. I clenched my jaw until my teeth ached. If the world saw my father as a murderer, then I would give them the truth. Even if I had to carve it out of Callias Rainman myself. But how? I had no army, no allies, except the few hidden beneath the floorboards of this cursed keep. I couldn't simply walk into the East Wing and demand answers. Number. This would have to be done carefully. Quietly. I glanced at the rug covering the secret passage and imagined the faces I'd seen below. The healer, the guards, the servants who had bowed when I entered. My people. My father's people. They were depending on me now. A slow, determined calm settled over me, replacing the panic that had clawed at my chest moments ago. If Callias thought he'd stripped me of everything, he was wrong. He'd only given me something worth fighting for. I rose from the bed and crossed to the window. Beyond the glass, the moon hung heavy and pale, bleeding light across the courtyard. I wondered if Callias was awake somewhere under that same sky, if he ever thought of what he'd done, or if there was even a shred of him left to think at all. Maybe I'd find out soon, because one way or another, I would uncover the truth about what happened to his uncle. And when I did, the world would finally know my father's name was not treachery. It was honor. The next day was a blur. Gisela appeared as usual, with Sarah and Myra following behind her for my lessons. Everything felt so normal it almost unsettled me. The same quiet orders, the same measured steps, the same set of eyes pretending not to look at me too long. Days passed like that. Lessons by day, etiquette, posture, the dull repetitions of Nightfell customs. And by night, I returned to the tunnels to meet my people and plan. Each evening, Sarah and I spoke in hushed voices under the earth, mapping out how we might reach the East Wing without being seen. We counted guard rotations, memorized servant routes, and timed when the lamps in the hall burned lowest. Every detail mattered. But one night, everything changed. I was returning from the tunnels later than usual, the stone passage cold under my bare feet. My candle had nearly burned out when I reached the corridor near my room. That's when I heard it, a loud crash, followed by a man's voice, sharp and furious. Callias. I froze. The sound was coming from somewhere up ahead, one of the council chambers near the eastern side of the hall. His voice was unmistakable, deep and harsh, echoing through the stone.
I've tried to kill her myself. I've even instructed others to do it. But he won't let me. Every time I send someone to finish it, he makes me stop them immediately.
My heart stopped. Who was he? Callias's voice trembled between rage and confusion.
He's usually obedient and submissive, but somehow when he's around her, or anything that has to do with her, he becomes dominant.
Another voice answered, weaker, frailer. A man's voice, old, cracked like dry leaves.
Try to keep him calm until I can make more of the potion. The problem is that...
Wait. Say no more. I smell someone.
My blood turned to ice. I clutched my skirts and ran. I didn't think, I just ran. My footsteps echoed too loudly, my breath came too fast. I could feel the weight of his presence. That sharp, predatory instinct that had once thrilled me now only made me sick with fear. I turned corner after corner until I reached my room. My hands shook as I fumbled with the latch and pushed the door open. Empty. No one was there. I closed the door quietly behind me, pressing my back against it as my heart thundered in my chest. I half expected Callias to be sitting in the dark, waiting, watching. But the room was still. Only the flickering candlelight and the faint hum of the night outside. I climbed into bed, though there was no rest to be found. My thoughts swirled in frantic circles. He wouldn't let me. He makes me stop them. The potion. Who was the he they spoke about? What potion? The words looped in my mind until the candle burned out and the room was swallowed by darkness. I stared into it, wide awake, wondering if I'd just learned the truth, or if I'd only brushed against something far more dangerous. Chapter 7. The next morning, I jumped as I saw the face I didn't want to see, Callias. He stood in the doorway of my chambers like a shadow the morning light couldn't touch. His presence filled the room before he even spoke, the air seeming to thin around him. His black hair was unbound today, damp, as if he'd come straight from the training grounds. The white collar of his tunic was streaked faintly with ash, and yet, somehow, he looked composed, calm, almost regal. And then he smiled. That same cruel, evil smile I'd once mistaken for warmth. The kind that didn't reach his eyes but carved something sharp across his face instead. My heart stopped for a moment. I hadn't seen him in weeks, not since the dungeon, not since that moment when something in his eyes had flickered between mercy and madness. I had prayed I wouldn't have to see him again so soon. But there he was. His voice came next, low and deliberate. Every word a blade dragged slowly across the air.
Where were you yesterday, Briar?
The question was simple, but it sank into me like a threat. I froze, my fingers curling around the edge of the table beside me to hide the tremor in my hands. His tone wasn't angry, not yet, but the quiet in his voice was worse than shouting. It was that measured calm that always came before the storm. My mouth went dry. Yesterday. I thought of the tunnels, of Sarah, of the voices I'd heard, his voice, and the frail old man's. He couldn't possibly know. Could he? He took a step closer, and I could smell the faint trace of smoke and iron that always clung to him. The scent that used to make me feel safe now made my stomach twist. I tried to meet his eyes, but found I couldn't. The faint red ring was there again around the gray, burning faintly in the morning light. I forced a breath past the lump in my throat. I was in my room, I said softly, trying to sound casual. Where else would I go? He tilted his head slightly, watching me as though studying a creature in a cage. His expression didn't change, but something in the air did. Heavy, tense, dangerous. He smiled again, but this time it didn't look human.
Strange.
He murmured.
Because I could have sworn your scent was somewhere it shouldn't be.
I felt the blood drain from my face. He let the words hang there, studying me for any sign of guilt. And then, just as suddenly, his smile vanished.
You keep defying me, Briar,
he said coldly.
Maybe I've given you too much freedom.
His voice cut through the air like a whip.
Guards, take her to my quarters. That is where she will be from now on.
I thrashed and bucked and begged, but the guard's hands were like iron around my arms. I didn't want to go to his rooms. How would I meet with Sarah? How would I keep planning? They dragged me through the corridors as I kicked and screamed, my hair falling loose, my voice breaking against the stone. When we reached his quarters, the first thing that hit me was the scent. Wolfsbane. An overpowering amount. I stumbled as they shoved me inside. The sharp, bitter smell burned my nose and stung my eyes. Why did he have that here? The only time a wolf uses wolfsbane is to suppress his wolf, but he was an alpha. He wasn't meant to suppress anything. And then I noticed the room, the furniture, the walls, the familiar crest carved into the mantel. This wasn't just his chamber. It was my father's old room. My knees gave out. I burst into tears. My father, my sweet, kind father, the man who had led with honor and mercy, the man Callias had murdered. This monster was now sleeping where he once had. Callias simply laughed.
Do you hate me that much?
He said, his voice dripping with mockery.
That just sleeping next to me brings you such sadness? Or are you afraid I might force myself on you?
I flinched at the cruelty in his tone. He leaned closer, his eyes gleaming red under the torchlight.
Don't worry. I'm not interested in filth like you.
His words hit harder than a blow.
You will stay here,
he continued coldly,
until you're ready to tell me where you were yesterday, and how you escaped, who you met with. You will not see Gisela. You will not have lessons. You will have no one.
He turned toward the door, his final words echoing through the room like a curse.
The only contact you will have is with me.
The door slammed shut, and for the first time since my father's death, I truly felt caged. I rummaged through the room, my hands tracing every corner, every seam in the walls, every inch of stone and wood. The smell of wolfsbane lingered heavily in the air, thick and bitter, seeping into the curtains, the sheets, even the floorboards. I couldn't shake the question. Why would an alpha drown his quarters in something meant to weaken his kind? The thought twisted inside me until an idea came. If there was a secret passage in the room I'd been in before, then there had to be one here too. My father's room was older, built in the same structure. There had to be. I searched for hours, tapping along the walls, behind the fireplace, under the rug, along the baseboards. My fingers ached, my knees bruised from kneeling on cold stone. Every hollow sound, every echo made my pulse quicken with hope, only to fade into disappointment. By the time exhaustion took over, my palms were raw and trembling. I didn't even realize when I'd collapsed against the floor. The last thing I remember was staring at the moonlight spilling through the window, thinking of my father's voice before sleep claimed me. But when I woke up, I wasn't on the floor anymore. I was on the bed. The sheets were drawn over me neatly. My shoes had been placed by the wall. Had he carried me here? The thought made my stomach twist. I sat there, frozen, trying to convince myself maybe a guard had done it. But I knew better. No one entered this room without his permission. I started thinking of ways I could reach Sarah, a sign, a message, something. But no matter how hard I tried to plan, there was no way. Not with guards stationed at the door day and night. Not when I didn't even know where the tunnel entrance was from here. So, for the next few days, I became a shell of myself. The walls closed in. The hours blended together until time lost meaning. I slept before Callias returned each night, pretending not to hear his footsteps or the sound of the latch turning. Meals came twice a day, breakfast and dinner, delivered by guards who never looked me in the eye. They placed the trays down and left without a word. I tried talking to them once, reasoning with them, even begging. But they said nothing. Not a sound. The silence became its own kind of torture. Days bled into one another, gray and slow. I found myself staring at the ceiling for hours, wondering what Sarah was doing, if she and the others were still planning without me, wondering if she thought I'd been caught. I nearly let despair win until I remembered. He still had to present me to the council. He couldn't avoid it forever. That thought became my anchor, my purpose, my reminder that this wasn't over yet. So I waited. I bid my time. Until one night, I woke up to a sound, a very painful scream, raw, guttural, and filled with something almost inhuman. Grunting followed, the sound of a struggle. It was Callias. He was covered in sweat, his breath harsh and uneven, his hands clutching at his chest like he was trying to tear something out of himself. His body jerked against the sheets, muscles tensing, his voice breaking in between low, desperate murmurs.
Let me out. Let me out.
The words sent a shiver down my spine. Of course, I hated him. He deserved every nightmare clawing through his skull. But the words, let me out, were strange. Not the kind of thing a monster says when haunted. Why was he yelling, let me out? Was he trapped in a coffin, surrounded by the ghosts of the people he'd killed? I hoped he was. The thought of his torment should have pleased me, and yet I couldn't look away. Curiosity crept in, cold and unwelcome. I moved closer, not because I cared, but because I wanted to understand what could frighten a man like him. His skin was burning hot, slick with sweat. His breaths came in ragged bursts. I reached out, hesitating only for a moment, and touched his arm. His eyes shot open. I gasped and stumbled back, but what I saw froze me in place. His eyes weren't red. They were gray. The same soft storm gray I remembered from before everything fell apart. The Callias who used to smile, who used to speak to me like I mattered. I leaned closer, my heart hammering.
Briar!
He whispered, his voice breaking.
Briar, is that you? Let me out.
But before he could finish, his body convulsed. The red bled back into his irises like ink spreading through water. His expression twisted, the warmth vanished, and then he shoved me away, hard. I hit the floor, wind knocked from my lungs. He stood over me, chest heaving, eyes glowing that same cursed crimson. The man I knew gone once again.
Don't you ever touch me again.
He barked. The sound tore through the room, echoing off the walls like a growl that wasn't entirely human. His eyes burned red, and then he was gone, storming out of the chamber so fast the door slammed against the wall. For a long moment, I just sat there on the floor, trembling, and then it hit me. Maybe it was the way he'd screamed, let me out, or how he'd called my name, desperate, pleading. But I knew with a chilling certainty that the man who had just left the room was not Callias. Somehow, the Callias I used to know was trapped, fighting something inside himself. Could he be mad? Could it be madness? Some broken mind splitting into pieces, creating another self? But no, it didn't add up. None of it did. Because why would he be taking Wolfsbane? Wolfsbane wasn't meant to heal the mind. It was meant to weaken wolves, to suppress their instincts, their power. Was he trying to suppress his bad side? My thoughts raced back to the night in the tunnel, to the voices I'd overheard. The voice had said,
He's usually obedient and submissive, but around her, he's dominant.
Someone was holding him back. Someone was controlling him. But how? And then I remembered what Sarah had said. The way Callias had killed the Silverbane leaders. The precision of it. The order of who died first. The way he'd done it exactly how his uncle had always spoken of. She'd said his uncle was missing. Alive, but not alive. My pulse quickened. If his uncle was controlling him, how was that even possible? The man was barely breathing, half dead, unless the body I saw breathing wasn't really him at all. Maybe his uncle had left that shell behind, moved into something stronger. I gasped. The thought was too wild, too impossible. But it was the only thing that made sense. His uncle had been possessing Callias's body all along. That was why the uncle's body still breathed, but never moved. Why the real Callias had screamed, "Let me out." Why fake Callias took wolfsbane, not to suppress his wolf, but to suppress real Callias. Chapter 8. I couldn't sleep. All night my mind replayed what I had discovered. The pieces fit too perfectly to ignore. The wolfsbane, the red eyes, the voice in the tunnel, the way he screamed, "Let me out." But how was possession even possible? The idea sounded insane, yet it made too much sense not to be true. Every detail pointed to it. Every instinct screamed it. I needed to talk to someone, anyone, about this. I needed to get out of this room and find Sarah. Then an idea came to me. I knew when he usually came back to the room, so I decided to pretend to be unconscious. He had shoved me earlier, hard enough that my back still ached, so it wouldn't seem strange if he found me collapsed on the floor again. If my plan worked, he'd think I was hurt, and he couldn't risk letting me die. Not after he'd told the council I was still alive. If I suddenly died, it would raise questions he couldn't afford. That was my only advantage. So I made my move. I downed a high dose of wolfsbane, enough to make me truly lose consciousness when he arrived. As the bitterness burned down my throat, I lay back against the cold stone floor and let the dizziness take me. The last thought that drifted through my mind before the dark claimed me was simple. Please, let this work. When I finally opened my eyes, the world was bright and blurred. My limbs felt heavy, my head swimming. I wasn't in his room anymore. The faint scent of herbs and linen told me where I was. The healer's chamber. My plan had worked. The healer noticed me stirring.
You're awake.
She murmured softly, relief in her tone. I groaned, pretending to struggle. Water, I rasped, my voice hoarse and weak. She nodded quickly and left the room to fetch it. The moment the door shut, I sat up, forcing my shaky legs to move. My eyes darted across the walls. And there it was. A faint seam near the floor, a hidden passage. My heart leapt. I pressed my fingers to the stone and tapped 8 times, once, twice, until I heard the faint click. It worked. I almost cried from relief. I slipped through, careful to stay quiet, and descended into the dark tunnels. The cold air hit me like freedom. My feet moved on instinct. 2 sharp left turns, then the drop, then the door nearly invisible in the wall. I knocked 8 times. The door creaked open. This time, Sarah stood there. Before I could say a word, I threw my arms around her, and for the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe. I know what's happening, I whispered, my voice trembling. I know what's wrong with him. Then, in one breathless rush, I told her everything, the nightmare, the wolfsbane, the red eyes, and the truth I had pieced together. Callias wasn't the monster. His uncle was. The room fell silent after I finished speaking. Every face turned toward me, wide eyes, furrowed brows, mouths half open as though they'd forgotten how to breathe. Sarah stood still for a long time, her expression unreadable. The flickering torchlight painted her features in shifting gold and shadow. Finally, she exhaled. You're certain? I saw it with my own eyes, I said quietly. His eyes. They changed. He called my name, pleaded to be let out, and then he wasn't him anymore. A murmur rippled through the survivors gathered there, disbelief, fear, and a strange, hollow kind of hope. The old Silverbane guards exchanged uneasy glances, the maids whispered prayers under their breath. My nursemaid was the first to speak.
So what are we going to do?
She asked, voice trembling.
If what you're saying is true, how do we stop something like that?
For a moment, no one answered. Then Sarah lifted her head, her tone steady, sharp as glass.
Why do you think his uncle keeps his real body so heavily guarded?
She asked.
If he can take over Callias's body completely, why keep the other one alive? Why not burn it? Destroy it?
Her gaze swept over the group.
Because he needs it.
A low murmur passed through the room. Sarah continued, her voice low but firm.
If his uncle's body wakes, the possession could end, or it could trap them both. Either way, he's keeping it close, protected. That's why I couldn't find it before.
Before I could respond, one of the survivors stepped forward, a woman I recognized by her calm, steady voice. The Silverbane healer.
It seems,
she said carefully,
that the magic he used to possess Alpha Callias is Fey dark magic.
Her words made the room go still.
I've read of such things,
she went on.
Fey magic never lasts forever in mortal hosts. It decays, like rot beneath the skin. The spirit will eventually be forced to return to its original body. That's why he keeps it alive, and that's why it's guarded.
Sarah frowned.
So, if the body wakes, he'll be drawn back to it?
The healer nodded.
Yes, the body must never be woken. Once it stirs, the possession breaks, and the host returns to its true form.
A cold silence followed. The meaning was clear. If the uncle's body awoke, Callias would be freed, but so would the monster that destroyed my father. I knew what had to be done. I stood, my voice steady even though my hands shook. We will wake his uncle's body tonight. Tonight, everything ends. My father's name will be cleared, and fake Callias will be destroyed. A stunned hush fell over the room. Faces shifted, hope, fear, and a terrible, fierce resolve flickering in their eyes. We can't wait, I added. If they discover the passage, they'll lock it down. If the healer raises the alarm because I disappeared, then they'll be searching for me. We move tonight, no matter what. Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line. She moved quickly then, the commander in her surfacing.
There's only one window, she said. Every night there is a shift change. It's different guards each time. Fake Callias is paranoid. He won't trust the same men twice. A maid comes in to clean. You'll use that.
She pointed to 5 of the Silverbane guards who had been silent until now.
You will disguise yourself as a maid. Those 5 will escort you, pretending to be the guard on duty. Meanwhile, I and several others will subdue the men who are supposed to be on watch. When that happens, you and these 5 guards sneak in.
Sarah's eyes met mine, fierce and direct.
There is no exit plan, she said bluntly. Once you wake the body up, he will be immediately violent, but I have no doubt you and the others can take him. His body is weakened from not being used, and you're stronger than you know, Briar. Once he is awakened and the spirit returns to his body, Callias will immediately come back to his senses.
Sarah spoke again, this time a goodbye. She placed a firm hand on my arm.
Remember, move when they move. Don't hesitate.
Her voice was low, steady, the way my father's used to be before battle.
And Briar, please come back.
The healer pressed a folded strip of linen into my palm.
If you're hurt, bind it. If you're scared, breathe through your nose and keep moving.
Her eyes softened.
Your father would be proud.
My nursemaid hugged me briefly, trembling.
You have his courage,
she whispered. The guards nodded in unison, their faces pale but resolute. One muttered,
We'll bring you back, my lady.
Though none of us believed it. Sarah caught my gaze again.
When the doors open, make a mark, so we know it's you. And remember where your courage comes from.
I nodded. My father, I said softly. They all bowed their heads. Then me and my men turned toward the tunnel, heart pounding, and walked into the dark. They reached the east wing exactly as Sarah had planned, quiet, together, each step measured like a held breath. The changeover happened without fanfare. Sarah and her team struck quick and clean, A muffled scuffle in a shadowed alcove, 2 sentries collapsed without a cry. The other guards, the ones who'd pretended to be on duty, slipped into place at the doorway like they belonged there. My heart hammered against my ribs as we moved. I kept my face down, the maid's veil hiding my mouth. 5 of our men flanked me, faces set, eyes burning with something fierce and terrible. The corridor smelled of dust and iron and the old cold of the keep. At the end of the hall, the door loomed, heavier than I expected, carved with old runes that the healer had warned me not to touch.
Now,
Sarah whispered. The false guards pushed the door open. Inside was a small vaulted chamber, lit by 1 guttering lamp. What we saw stopped us cold. It wasn't just 1 man. It was dozens, no, hundreds. Rows upon rows of identical bodies stretched across the room, each lying perfectly still on stone slabs. Faces pale, hands folded, chests rising and falling in the same slow, rhythmic breath. 200 uncles. All of them motionless, all of them alive. The silence was deafening. My breath caught in my throat. "What is this?" I whispered. But the words barely left my lips. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. Which one of them was the real body? Before we could even begin to move, a low, mocking laugh echoed through the chamber. The sound was familiar. Too familiar. Callias. No, fake Callias. He stepped out from the shadows, his eyes burning that unnatural red, his smirk cruel and slow. The faint flicker of torchlight played over his face, and every inch of him radiated smug, terrible satisfaction.
Did you really think I wouldn't find out what you were up to?
He drawled, voice low and venomous.
Foolish girl.
He took another step forward, spreading his arms like he was welcoming us to his stage.
You, Silverbane whelps never learn. So predictable, so sentimental. You thought you'd sneak in here, wake him, and be heroes.
His voice dropped, turning colder.
Your father was just as naive, always preaching about peace, always talking about unity. But peace is weakness.
His lip curled, and his tone shifted. No longer Callias's voice, but something older, darker, steeped in hatred.
I watched him beg before he died, and I made sure the world called him a traitor.
The air thickened around us. I felt Sarah stiffen beside me. One of the guards growled low in his throat, hand inching toward his blade. Fake Callias laughed again, sharper this time.
You want to know what happened to your beloved Alpha Callias? The boy who wanted peace?
He tilted his head, his eyes glowing brighter, red bleeding through the gray.
I crushed him. I hollowed him out and wore him like a second skin. And even now, he scratches at the inside of his cage, begging to be free.
He leaned closer, eyes locking on mine.
Pathetic, isn't it? All that strength, all that love, wasted on a girl too blind to see the monster sleeping in her bed.
He smiled, wide, wicked, and utterly wrong.
And now, Briar Ashforian,
He hissed.
You'll join your father in the dirt.
His laughter still echoed through the chamber when the torches flickered, an unnatural wind sweeping through the rows of still, pale bodies. Sarah drew her blade, the others following suit, but I barely heard them. My eyes darted over the endless line of bodies, panic clawing at my chest. There were too many. There was no way to tell which one was real. We didn't have time. Fake Callias kept speaking, voice thick with venom.
He begged me to stop, you know. Callias. Weak, pathetic thing. I could feel him crying for you while I slit your father's throat.
My blood went cold. He stepped forward, the air rippling with his power.
And when I'm done here, maybe I'll wear your body next. For the thrill of it.
The words barely registered. I wasn't listening anymore, because something in the air had changed. Beneath the stench of sweat and rot and iron, there was wolfsbane, strong, raw, familiar, the same bitter scent that had poisoned the walls of his chamber. It burned my throat, coated my tongue, made my eyes water. That smell. He'd used wolfsbane to suppress his wolf. If the uncle's real body still reeked of it, then it had to be his. I spun toward the far corner of the chamber where the scent was sharpest, thick enough to make me dizzy. There, I gasped. Sarah looked up in shock. Briar! But I was already moving. Fake Callias turned, eyes blazing red.
Don't you dare!
I ran. My skirts tore against the stone. One of the guards tried to shield me, but fake Callias flung him aside like a rag doll. I reached the bier. The stench was so strong it made me gag. The body lying there was paler than the others, skin faintly green from wolfsbane seeping through its veins. My hands shook as I touched its face. Cold. Too cold. Please, I whispered, let me be right about this. Fake Callias's roar tore through the room.
No!
I slammed my palm against the body's chest. A pulse answered, weak, faint. But there. Then the body breathed. Every torch in the chamber flared, flames bent inward toward the bier as if drawn by a storm. The possessed Callias staggered, clutching his head, a guttural snarl ripping from his throat. Before he could scramble away, the uncle's soul had returned to his real body. He tried to run, to escape, but it was too late. Sarah was on him in an instant. I ran to Callias's fallen form and sobbed. I had lost my father. I could not lose him too. I ordered the other guards, those guards Callias had brought with him, to seize the uncle and take him to the dungeons, Sarah accompanying them. They moved, confused and shaken. After all, the man they'd all been told was dead was breathing before them. My men and I carried Callias back to his quarters and summoned the healer. For days I stayed at his bedside. I watched him sleep and wake, watched the color return to his face until, one morning, he spoke. He told me how he'd been trapped inside his own body, how he watched everything happen and tried to stop it but could not. The only thing he'd managed to do, between the thing that wore him, was keep fake Callias from hurting me. He apologized for not being able to save my father. He named names. Renfis was his uncle's name, and the frail potion master who'd helped him was half Fae. The next day we went to the council and told them everything. Evidence, witnesses, Callias himself. My father's name was cleared. Renfis was stripped of rank, demoted to Omega and stripped of his wolf. Death felt too merciful. I suggested harsher mutilations to ensure he could never harm again, cuts to the tongue, and the removal of what made him powerful. The council sanctioned some punishments, though not all I wanted. As for Silverbane, we began the slow, uneasy integration with the Nightfell Pack, my father's dream stitched back together under wary eyes. It was not the peace my mother had imagined, but it was a start. Survivors finding a way forward, the guilty exposed, and my father's name finally cleared.